And hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Chapters here on Armstrong Cable. Chapters is the television program that profiles local authors, editors, and publishers in our community. I'm Eliot Parker, and it's great to have you with us. Our episode this week comes to you from Empire Books and News at Pullman Square in downtown Huntington. We're pleased to have graphic novelist and filmmaker Daniel Boyd as our guest this week. And Daniel Boyd is an acclaimed filmmaker with dozens of films to his credit, including movies such as Chillers, Strangest Dreams, Invasion of the Space Preachers, and Paradise Park to his credit. He's a media studies professor at West Virginia State University, where he's been there since 1983, and he's also taught around the world, including in Tanzania, as a three-time Fulbright scholar. He's produced nearly every genre of film, and his television work has earned 3 National Telly Awards and 2 regional Emmy nominations. He's recently expanded into the graphic novel creation with Chillers the Graphic Novel, which came out from Transfusion Publishing, and it was the 2012 Sheldorf nominee for Original Graphic Novel of the Year and Gasley nominee for Best Horror Anthology. Chillers 2 was released in 2013, and Carbon, his latest work, is scheduled for release in May of 2014. Boyd also serves as the artist at residence at West Virginia State University's Economic Development Center on Charleston's west side. And we are pleased to have him as our guest today here on Chapters. Danny, welcome, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Eliot. I appreciate you letting me come on and talk about some stuff.
That's great. I'm so glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about how this all started for you, how you got into filmmaking, and then transitioning over towards the graphic novel, and how all this got started for you.
You know, a lot of luck, and hard work, I have to say. But with film, I grew up in West Virginia. I didn't think West Virginians could be filmmakers, and I just sort of had an aptitude with cameras. And once I got through undergrad school with a communications degree and did manual labor, I realized I need to go back to school. What do I like? I love movies, and happened to find a grad program in Arkansas. And then, took one filmmaking class and started making movies. And just, it just caught on after that. And then 30 years of that, 30-some movies, going from documentaries to shorts to the feature films, kind of burnt out on film. And I was talked into making one more with I also worked in pro wrestling with my tag team partner, Death Falcon Zero, Bill Bittner. We were doing the movie Death Falcon Zero versus the Zombie Slug Lords, and we just couldn't get it finished. It was, and we shot the foreign scenes. We shot the scenes in Africa. We shot the scenes in Europe. It just wasn't going to be good enough. But Bill and I were working the road a lot, and I thought, I want to save this story. And I knew he'd continued to read comics. I hadn't read a comic in 30 years. I said, do they still do illustrated books? He said, yeah. I said, let's do that with it. So that's when we did DFZ, the DFZ book. And while we were getting it ready, I started reading comics from the last 30 years and went, holy cow, they're not just for kids anymore. And for me, it's about storytelling, man. I've got, I don't have as many years as at the back end as I had at the front end. I got a lot of stories to tell. And I just fell in love with the medium. So I decided 5 years ago I was going to reinvent and, work in graphic narrative.
Tell us a little bit about graphic narrative, because it is sort of a subgenre that's really catching on in popularity as time goes on. And it seems like readers have a fascination with zombies. They have a fascination with the paranormal. What are some of the challenges in writing in that genre and trying to create a narrative structure within that genre of graphic novels? Does it follow a lot of some of the other genres in terms of how you set up character and plot, or is there anything that you have to consider different from those traditional genres?
Eliot, it was really an easy transition for me. Most people go from comics to movies. I went from movies to comics. So I already write screenplay for them. I think in terms of a blueprint to manufacture the product, not a terminal product. So it really wasn't. I mean, it's a 3-act structure. It's basically a character and challenge. It's almost a template of films. Now, if you're in the serial comic, you're 24 pages a month. Where the blow off is 6 issues in, 8 issues in, or something like that. With a standalone graphic novel, which is nice, it's like a movie. It begins and it ends. You can carry it on if you want, but it's really, with my students now, I teach it as cinema on the page. It's it's like making movies with a lot less hassles.
Well, when you look at making something like that, what is the process for doing kind of the graphic narrative or the graphic novel from the time you come up with the idea till the time that you have a completed rough draft? Because you mentioned it's sort of like a picture in words, so to speak. But how does that process work, and how long does that take from the time you get an idea for a graphic novel until the time you have a draft completed?
Well, as you and I were talking before, it's this crazy world of publishing, which everything takes forever and no one can explain why it does. I mean, like Carbon, my new thing, I started it 5 years ago. I never had a movie that took that long. But really, once you're efficient, once you have the system down, it's not that long. However long it takes you to write. In the case of Carbon, I wrote it in a month. It's 120 pages of artwork. You contract with the artist. In my case, it's Eddie Geddes in Brazil. So that's a year process. And then, a couple months of revisions, and then it should come out. But then you put that publishing factor in. But for Chillers, for example, with the short stories that we did, like, based on how the movie was. The movie was a vignette of 5 stories with central arc to it. Basically, we write 8-10 pager, send it to the artist. 2 weeks later, we have the art, send it to our letterer. Week later, we have the letter. So you could turn it around in a month, theoretically. And that's, with the shorter versions. I mean, it's still a company. I mean, there with comics, you've got the writer, you've got the penciler who is the artist, you've got the inker, you have the colorist, and then you have letterer. But still fewer stages than cinema.
How did you find your artist? You mentioned that he is from Brazil, or I assume still lives in Brazil. How did you guys meet, and what's that working relationship like, being separated by continents?
It is so fascinating because making movies, you become intimate with people because you're together for a month. And I've tended to work with the same people over my whole career. In comics now, I've worked with a dozen artists, and I've never met one of them. It's all internet, and I've got this great pal in Charleston, Jason Pell, who helped me get into comics. He did Zombie Highway, and he's done some other things lately. He said, "Man, there are websites now. You go to these things and you put out a notice," and I said, "I don't want to do that." He said, "Trust me, do it." He said, "I'll do it for you." So he put the notice, because we were playing off Chillers to start with. We were hoping people remembered the movie, and lucky for me they did. But man, my computer blew up. It took me 2 days to sort through all of the responses to a list of 20.
Wow.
And you know what? I'm still working with a lot of the same guys that came from that, because it's like in movies, you get with people that you like. Now Eddie's the bomb. I just liked his work the most, so I went with him with Carbon, and he's done a few of the Chiller stories, including a couple of mine. But it's through a translator. You go through their company down there. I mean, the guy doesn't speak Portuguese.
Right.
He's never seen a coal field in his life. But, thank God for Google Images.
Sure.
But this is, he and I, in our broken communication are kind of saying, holy cow, it's here, it's happening.
Yeah, that's great. And we've had a lot of writers when we've talked about sort of the writing process, but also the publishing process on the other end. That's kind of a frequent comment we hear a lot of writers say, is that technology and email and virtual everything has changed the way in terms of how you can take an idea from draft stage to publication stage without even having to be in the same room with people. And so it's interesting to hear that process still works for you with regards to working with your friend in Brazil. Tell us a little bit about Carbon, scheduled to come out in May of 2014. I know it's your latest work. Tell us a little bit of what it's about and the impetus, where it came from, and what you hope will happen with that work once it gets out and disseminated to readers.
Well, I told you this is my first Carbon interview, so.
Oh,
So
not to put you on the spot.
How long is the show? 3 hours?
That's right.
I've got to find a way to. Let me tell you, I've been thinking about this for 30 years. It's this whole issue of coal for us West Virginians. It's not a black and white issue. My first real job was in Mingo County. I got a crash course on the realities of coal, and my views lean a little green, but people got to work. We have to support our economy, all of these kinds of things. And I never had the right venue to, I don't like to use celebrity to kind of protest. You know, I never had the right product. But then I came up with carbon. We're carbon. What if you reverse the process? Instead of us turning into carbon, then it came back to us. And then I realized this is the movie of my life, but I'm never going to get, you know, $100 million movie budget. I'm just not in that league. So I just sort of floated around there for years until I got into comics. And really, that's why I got into comics. I started with Chillers, but it was all part of my plan because I wanted to tell that story. Gods, monsters, and evil coal barons. A work of entertainment, sensationalized entertainment. My big monster movie. But I also rewrote portions of our spiritual beliefs and, you know, mythos and all of that lumped in together with it. Primarily, I want to entertain. You know, that's anyone that doesn't want to entertain that shouldn't be in this business. I mean, primarily that, but also this conversation that we're having about coal now. We're between, as I wrote in my afterword, between a black rock and a hard place.
Right.
It's not black and white. It's gray. What do we do? You know, it was our livelihood, but it's had these devastating effects on worker safety. You know, these recent tragedies that we've had. And now it's at the crossroads of the whole climate change conversation. But what bothers me the most is that West Virginians are known for being independent. Well, we haven't been. We're now being manipulated by both sides of this whole thing. It used to be, you know, the companies would hire thugs to come in and put down the rebellion. Now they hire PR people who redesign our images and feed it back to us, and we seem to accept it.
Right.
With this, you know, first of all, I want to say the Emperor's not wearing any clothes. I'm not putting your bumper sticker on my car. I don't care if you pay for Marshall Sports or not. Quit telling me what my image is, and they got us fighting against each other, which is the worst thing. So I'm hoping that with a comic book, you know, we can reevaluate. Sometimes we need works of the sensational, the fantastic to digest things, and hopefully take it to another audience, a wider audience in a entertainment field. I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist. You know, I'm not a politician. I'm not a policymaker. I'm an entertainer. But maybe this is a way, I don't know, maybe to take it to a different audience and kind of dilute the conversation a little bit so it's not so polarizing, you know what I mean?
Sure.
It's just like you're for us or you're against us. Well, no, there's some in between here.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, room on both sides of the issue for a little give and take. Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's going to be a really great project when it does get out and get disseminated. I wanted to ask you, too, about being a filmmaker, and you touched on that some in your earlier comments. As writers, we're always influenced by other writers. As a filmmaker, growing up or even today, who has inspired you either as an actor, as a director, as a producer? Do you pattern yourself after any one of those in particular when you sit down to direct a film or produce a film?
You'll be surprised by my answer. It's easy for my greatest influence was Rod Serling. Wasn't even a filmmaker. So, you know, a television writer, producer. Did a few feature films, but The Twilight Zone. Again, back to my theory of some of the best ways to present controversial, difficult things is package it into the sensational, you know, to help us digest those things. And if you look at those shows, man, that was 1950 through 59 through 64, Redneck America, 3 channels, and what he was able to do. So that was hands down my biggest influence. On the other hand, when I approach shooting a film, now I should say this too to start with, though, because you look at the movies that I've made, they've been rather B-movie-ish, you know, and, you know, I'm not ashamed of that. I've worked with what I have, but I think we always had something to say. But I came of age as a filmmaker when the National Lampoon movies started.
Right.
And the horror of the 1980s with the video boom. So, you know, that was, and I was always a horror fan anyway, and a comedy fan, but those great works of the 80s in horror, and then the National Lampoon movies, Animal House, Vacation. Well, I wanted to do a horror film, which I did in the 80s, and it broke out. It was as big as any of those others. And then I wanted to make my Lampoon movie. So I did Strangest Dreams, Invasion of the Space Creatures, which has just been re-released now. We just had a screening in Cleveland last weekend. And, they asked me, well, why did you want to do that? I said, well, I wanted to make a funny movie. But I also had a, backstory on that one was, we deal with a lot of stereotypes as West Virginians. And it used to make me angry like everyone else. And then I just said, the best way to deal with that is do good work. So in Strangest Dreams, I basically took every stereotype that had ever angered me, blew it up, turned it right around, pushed it right back out. And I think it works. I let the audience be the judge of that. But just watch the movie and see who are the good guys in the end with that one. But with all that, lowbrow talk, I approach a film like Ingmar Bergman, the classic Swedish director. I'm a very formalist director. It's very closed frame, very controlled frame. You get actors who can act. You let them act. You control it. You don't let it control you. And I teach a state, so I teach international cinema every semester, and I always show the Seventh Seal, and I'm just reminded, that's who I ripped off. That's whose style I use when I shoot pictures.
Great. We talk so much about writing and publishing and how sometimes it can be a tough medium to get into, especially for writers that are just starting, and a lot of our writers that we've had on, and you've touched on it too, about the craziness of this industry. How does that apply to film? Is film, in terms of the ceiling, to try to get your name out there, get movies produced, get an audience, get a following, is it as difficult as writing, or is it difficult but in a different way? How does that compare to trying to get noticed as a writer? And since you've done both, kind of with the comic books and the graphic novels and film, does it sort of follow the same parallels in terms of trying to get noticed and trying to get your name out there as other writers would experience?
It does, but this is what I've been telling people lately when I talk to younger emerging talent is, as far as film goes and publishing too, the best thing that has happened is the digital age, and that now the proletariat, anyone has control of manufacturing. And the bad news is the proletariat has control of manufacturing. There's no gatekeeping anymore.
Right.
In my day, we used to complain about the distributors. There aren't distributors anymore. I mean, the internet is the free flow. I'm sure you're seeing this in publishing. Anybody who can do it will do it and are doing it.
Right.
And what we've lost is the gatekeeper. So it's a tough time. Sometimes we needed that we complained about to give us to give us the push so that other people would take us seriously. I'm still finding out in publishing. I've got, again, I'm with Caliber Entertainment with Carbon. Their previous company was Transfusion. I'm very happy with them. It's a help. But I don't want to be doom and gloom. But it'd be a tough time starting in both businesses. I mean, like I say, the good news is you can do it. I mean, even on our low budgets, we're still spending $30,000 at the lowest because we're shooting film. Well, you can make War and Peace now. You take his camera right there. You can make a better looking picture than a lot of that stuff
Right.
done.
Right.
But it's just how do you choose in this short attention span society? How do I find that, get that product to market? And I'm getting a long answer to your short question. I don't know. Luckily I had some recognition from my early film days, and I'm milking it to the end. I'm going to use whatever, and I'm grateful. I still have people coming up. I'm kind of working the convention scene, to tell me how much they enjoyed Chillers when they were a child, and I'm thinking, well, thank you, that's awesome for that. So, this is going to be an ongoing conversation for us. We'll see.
I wanted to ask you too about a trend that has popped up. People that are active on social media, Facebook, I know you are, on Twitter, and other types of social media. We've seen a lot of publishers, a lot of authors. When you talk about that, sort of the proletariat's wide open now, using programs and companies like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and all these kinds of things. I see it more on the film side than I see on the publishing side, but a lot of companies are doing that. Even some publishers are doing that. I know Evil Gesture Press is a publisher that produces a lot of graphic novels and those kinds of things, horror-type genre books, sci-fi, and they've started going to that model more to have donations. They'll set a limit of $10,000 to produce this book, and then readers and others donate. Then they use that money to do that. Is that something that you see a lot, in your work on the film side and the graphic novel side? And is that a new paradigm that we're going to see more and more often as time goes on, because we've lost that gatekeeper, and in some ways publishers are using this not only to raise money, but using it as sort of a quality control mechanism? Do you think that's going to be something that we'll see for a while to come?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up after I was so depressing about the other part of it. That's the hope I see in the crowdsourcing. I did a little bit of it with Carbon. Knew more then, I would have done better with it. But actually, a lot of graphic novels are doing that, and even Caliber Entertainment, my publisher out of Detroit, they're going to do it for some projects. And what it's very smart is you narrow your audience, and it's like a pre-sale. Mm-hmm. You basically pre-sell the book, and in the old days of movies we get an advance. Right. Well, this is like the equivalent of that, and yes, I think that I do think that I hope that stays around. Mm-hmm. And it's Jason Pell, the guy I was telling you about in Charleston, that helped get me in comics. Quiet guy. Not a big promoter, but he's funded his last 2 books, the total manufacturing of 2 full color graphic novels that way. So, I think it's a good thing for us.
Okay. And as we finish up in our time remaining, Danny, when we talk to you about film and writing, somebody out there who is interested in getting started in either one of these mediums, film or writing, and maybe not even comic books or graphic novels, maybe just writing in general. You've been around the business for a long time, taught for over 30 years at West Virginia State, working with students and mm-hmm. students who have that desire to be aspiring filmmakers. What advice would you give someone that is thinking about starting into this? And we've talked about some of the struggles with maybe trying to get started now because of the environment today. But anybody thinking about that, any advice you would give them if they're looking to go one of those directions?
Well, it's going to be the cliche, just work hard. It doesn't have, and what I tell writers all the time is, if you're going to write, read. And there's so many books about this, and then get a hold of me. If they're West Virginians, I don't say no to anyone. They don't always like my advice, but you can find me at danielboyd.com. I never turn down, at least a chat, but it's all out there. But it's, again, cliche, it doesn't happen overnight. It's just, I'm over 35 years into the business. So, it's hard work. But the main thing I would say, and you know this as a writer, read. Man, when we get together, filmmakers get together, the last thing we talk about is film. Mm-hmm. What have you read? What are you reading? And I'm sure it is, you're a writer, so actually you're going to talk about other things that you've read and stuff. But be curious about the world, and, get a day job.
Yeah.
So this is your show. Do you get to talk about your book?
Sometimes I do. but it's more fun to talk with you guys. Yes.
New book coming out. Yes. We're very excited.
Yes, I am making arrangements is coming out, and I'm going to mention that on a future taping actually. But Daniel Boyd, we're delighted to have you here. Thank you so much for being here. And again, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, danielboyd.com is your website, and they can find your email address and all your contact information there, and information about your books and movies as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on Chapters.
Thanks
we really
for having
appreciate
me, pal.
it. Enjoyed it so much.
Thanks for letting me talk about Carbon finally.
Absolutely. Glad to do it. Glad to be your debut interview for that book. I'm real excited for that. Thank you so much. And we want to also give a special thanks to our good friends at Empire Books and News here at Pullman Square in downtown Huntington for providing our studio taping space for this episode of Chapters, and we invite you to stop by Empire Books and News. They have the largest selection of books and magazines in the tri-state, so no matter what you like to read or what kind of picky reader you think you are or picky reader you have in your home, they've got something that can satisfy any need. Reading-wise, either magazines, books, short stories, whatever it is that you're looking for, stop by at Empire Books and News, talk to Charlotte and her staff, and they'll be sure to find the book and the genre that you're looking for. And we appreciate their support and providing our studio taping space today. And lastly, if you have a question, comment, or story suggestion about this Chapters program or any other Chapters program you've seen here on Armstrong Cable, we'd like to hear from you. You can send us an email to the address that you see right here on the bottom of your screen. It's LP4, the letter L, letter P, number 4, at zoominternet.net. We appreciate all the feedback that we get about this Chapters program, so please keep those comments coming. And that's going to do it for us this time on Chapters. Please come again next time. And in the meantime, stay tuned to this station for news and views that impact you and your community.